Coming up on Arirang News, the Israeli army calls for the evacuation of more than 1 million civilians besieged in Gaza to southern areas within 24 hours, signaling an imminent ground offensive. The death toll continues to soar as Israel maintains its bombardment of Gaza in response to the Hamas attack. In a show of strength against Pyongyang, a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan, arrives in South Korea's southern port of Busan, also marking the 70th anniversary of the alliance between Seoul and Washington. It appears the South Korean economy is experiencing a gradual easing of economic slowdown. The assessment is made by the Finance Ministry, saying there are signs of improvement in production and exports in the manufacturing industry, particularly in semiconductors. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with fear in Gaza, where the fighting between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas continues. The Israeli military has called on the more than 1 million trapped Palestinians to evacuate to the south within 24 hours. This ahead of an expected ground operation in the coming days, while the UN says the mass relocation could bring devastating consequences. Our Park Gun-woo leads us off.
Buildings have been destroyed beyond all recognition in Gaza under a continuous bombardment from the Israel Defense Force in the 6 days since the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas launched a murderous attack on Israel. Now, the IDF has notified the United Nations that from midnight on Friday, 1.1 million people living in Northern Gaza must relocate to the south of the Wadi Gaza Nature Reserve within the next 24 hours. According to AP, the IDF's order indicates an impending ground offensive in Gaza City, the enclave's largest city, within a few days, even though the Israeli military has not confirmed this. This warning also applies to UN staff and those sheltering in UN facilities there. A UN spokesperson in New York said the organization considers it impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences. The spokesperson added the UN strongly appeals for any such order, if confirmed, to be rescinded, avoiding what could transform what is already a tragedy into a calamitous situation. The ongoing Israel-Hamas war has already left over 10,000 people injured and up to 5,000 dead on both sides. Civilian deaths in Gaza especially have been rising, following the IDF completely cutting off Gaza and halting water, fuel, electricity, and food supplies. The IDF said it would maintain its siege until Hamas frees the 150 hostages it took during the attacks on Israeli settlements and towns. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said there are over 420,000 displaced people in the Gaza Strip who have lost their homes as of Thursday local time. This was an increase of more than 80,000 compared to the day before. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
In the meantime, the recent surprise attack by Hamas on Israel has raised questions of failure and accountability within Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. Our Choi Soo-hyung explains.
There is growing criticism of the Benjamin Netanyahu government in Israel for failing to prevent a surprise attack by Hamas on October 7th. The daily Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported on Thursday local time that Israeli Education Minister Yoav Kesh said that this incident happened under the current government and they will take responsibility for it. The minister also emphasized that no one can escape responsibility, including himself as a government member. This is the first time a cabinet member has publicly admitted the government's responsibility. Before this, cabinet members had generally avoided giving public statements about the Hamas attack. On the same day, the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, approved of the emergency united government, including a number of centrist opposition lawmakers, with a vote of 66 in favor and 4 against. However, the leader of the largest opposition party, former Prime Minister Yair Lapid, refused to participate, though he mentioned that he would support war efforts from outside the government, considering the country was in a wartime situation. Previously, Netanyahu's government had passed a law eliminating the Supreme Court's authority to overturn government decisions it considered irrational, reducing the judiciary's powers. Netanyahu argued this was to prevent judicial interference in politics, but the move faced intense opposition in Israel and from abroad. The centrist opposition National Unity Party also vigorously opposed the legislative changes, but its leader, Benny Gantz, emphasized the party's support for the war. Renowned Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari wrote in a column for the Washington Post that many military officers and experts had warned the government that Netanyahu's policies were putting Israel in danger by eroding its deterrence power. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
For the second time this year, a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Ronald Reagan, has docked in South Korea's southern port city of Busan, marking the 70th anniversary of the Seoul-Washington alliance. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji explains what this arrival means.
In a show of force against North Korea, the USS Ronald Reagan and its battle group are currently in Busan for a 5-day visit. This is the first time in about 7 months that a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is in South Korea, since the USS Nimitz docked at Busan in late March. Before arriving on Thursday earlier this week, it took part in a trilateral maritime drill with South Korea and Japan in international waters southeast of Jeju Island. Seoul's defense ministry says the visit is part of Washington's commitment to enhancing regular visibility of U.S. strategic assets to the Korean peninsula, in response to North Korea's advancing nuclear program. A spokesperson for the carrier strike group said that although the U.S. Navy aircraft carriers are deployed to South Korea frequently, the timing of this visit makes it more special.
This visit is special because it takes place near the 70th anniversary of the Mutual Defense Treaty between our countries.
He added they aim to build interoperability at sea towards shared goals and a free and open Indo-Pacific. While the carrier stays in Busan until next Monday, U.S. Navy sailors will be taking part in community relations events to build relationships between the two countries' naval forces and their people. Meanwhile, the arrival of the aircraft carrier enraged North Korea, which views the deployment of such a powerful U.S. military asset as a major security threat. Its state media on Friday threatened to stage the most powerful and rapid first strike, saying that its nuclear doctrine allows the regime to take necessary actions, such as preemptive use of nuclear arms, in case it believes a nuclear attack is imminent. The last time the USS Ronald Reagan came to South Korea in September last year, the North conducted ballistic missile tests to protest. So there is a possibility that the regime may engage in more provocations while the carrier is in Busan. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea is on pace to deploy nuclear-armed ICBMs that could challenge U.S. missile defenses. This observation was shared in a report by the U.S. Congressional Commission on Strategic Posture on Thursday, local time. The report also warns of a potential 7th nuclear test by the regime and that its chemical and biological weapons programs continue to raise much concern. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is expected to remain committed to advancing the regime's nuclear arsenal as a centerpiece of its security structure. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on Friday that top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will hold a trilateral meeting early next week in Jakarta. Kim Gun, South Korea's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, is also planning to have bilateral meetings with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Hiroyuki Namaz, respectively. The three nations will be discussing ways to cooperate when it comes to concerns about an arms deal between North Korea and Russia, as well as Pyongyang's recent push to bolster its nuclear armament. This will be the first meeting since July, since Japan appointed a new envoy in August. It appears the South Korean economy is experiencing a gradual easing of economic slowdown. The assessment is made by the Finance Ministry, saying there are signs of improvement in the manufacturing industry, particularly in semiconductors. But uncertainties remain following the recent unrest in the Middle East. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young with the details.
South Korea's economic slowdown is easing, according to the Finance Minister's latest Green Book released on Friday. The minister's description of the economic slowdown has changed to gradually easing from the previous report's partially easing. This is mainly due to signs of a rebound in manufacturing production and exports. The manufacturing production index in August increased by 5.6% from the previous month, marking a rise for the first time in 3 months. Particularly noteworthy was the significant rebound of 13.4% in the chip industry. Exports in the third quarter decreased by 9.8% on-year, the lowest decline since the fourth quarter of last year when exports began to decline on a quarterly basis. The Finance Ministry also expressed optimism for the tourism sector, citing last month's on-year growth of over 800% in the number of Chinese tourists. However, the ministry has made it clear that this does not necessarily imply a complete economic recovery. It expressed greater caution regarding external factors and inflation compared to last month's report, citing uncertainties like rising volatility in global oil prices. Regarding inflation, it said the country has seen a gradual downtrend in prices, though consumer prices in September recorded their highest on-year increase in 5 months of 3.7%. The government evaluates that uncertainties remain due to the war in Ukraine and the outbreak of military conflict in the Middle East, as this could lead to more volatility in raw material prices.
As Israel and Palestine are not oil-producing nations and are geographically distant from the Strait of Hormuz, a vital oil trading route, it's expected that the impact on global oil prices, the financial markets, and the real economy will be limited. However, given the uncertainty regarding the potential escalation of the conflict, the South Korean government is remaining vigilant and considering all possibilities.
The government plans to control inflation by managing risks from both home and abroad in order to make sure people's livelihoods aren't heavily impacted. It also expressed its commitment to boosting domestic demand, investment, and exports while improving the economic structure. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's Finance Minister Choo and U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen met in Morocco to discuss geopolitical uncertainties and bilateral economic cooperation. The two policymakers met on Thursday on the margins of the IMF and World Bank annual meetings. Although their exact agenda was not disclosed, it is said that the economic impact of the Israeli-Hamas conflict and the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act was discussed at length. Choo expressed gratitude to the U.S. government for allowing the supply of U.S. devices into Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix semiconductor factories in China. Some positive signs in South Korea's job market with an all-time high employment rate last month for any September. The number of on-year job additions has also picked up, but not those in the manufacturing sector and for young adults. An Sung-jin has the numbers.
According to Statistics Korea on Friday, 28.7 million people were employed in South Korea in September. That figure is an increase of more than 300,000 compared to the same month the year before. It's the first time since June that the on-year increase rate has exceeded 300,000 after the figure dipped to the 200,000 range in July and August. The employment rate last month reached a record high for any September since records began being compiled in 1982. The rate was mainly driven by workers in their 30s, who saw an on-year increase of 1.5 percentage points, and those aged 60 and above, with the figure for that group rising 0.9 percentage points from last year. However, youth employment has continued its decline for the 11th consecutive month, with an on-year decrease of 89,000 for the 15 to 29 age bracket. An official from Statistics Korea attributed this to high youth employment last year and decreased population in that demographic, emphasizing the need to focus on the employment rate rather than the number.
The number of people employed last September was high, and although that number decreased, it was due to the base effect. Also, a basic change in population structure should also be taken into consideration.
Looking at individual sectors, employment in the healthcare and social assistance sector, as well as accommodation and restaurant services, saw an increase, while manufacturing and wholesale and retail sectors saw a dip.
Not all manufacturing sectors are seeing a decline. Though digital products and metal processing are decreasing, the automotive and medical sectors are continuing to show an increasing trend in employment.
And unemployment figures dropped to the lowest for any September since 2009 to 660,000. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
U.S. consumer prices accelerated slightly faster than expected in September, keeping inflation a centerpiece for policymakers there when it comes to setting its key rate. Lee Seung-jae has more.
According to the latest data released Thursday by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. consumer prices remained high in September due to rising gas and rent costs. The September Consumer Price Index rose 3.7% on year, holding steady with August's on-year gains, but slightly higher than economists' expectations of a 3.6% rise. On month, inflation was up 0.4%. Statistics also show that the Shelter Index, which is largely a measurement of rental leases, as well as the implicit rental value of owner-occupied properties, accounted for 70% of the monthly core increase and more than half of the overall monthly increase. If the rise in shelter prices is removed from the overall CPI, core CPI rose just 0.1% for the month and is up 2% on year, the lowest annual increase that the index has recorded since March 2021. Also, food price inflation is at its lowest rate since March 2021, matching the month's on-year rise of 3.7%. It also marks the first time since early 2022 that food prices did not outpace overall inflation. Meanwhile, U.S. stocks sank on Thursday, ending a four-day streak due to the unexpectedly high inflation reading, which sparked concern about higher interest rates by the U.S. Fed before the end of the year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shed 0.5%, with the tech-heavy Nasdaq also sinking 0.6% on the day. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Korea ranks 6th out of 62 countries for its artificial intelligence industry. Now, this is according to UK data company Tortoise Media that was shared by the Federation of Korean Industries earlier on this Friday. The latest ranking is also 2 places higher compared to that in 2019. The company also claims Korea holds the most AI-related patents after the US and China. But by companies, Samsung ranked number 1 for the total number of patents registered. As South Korea kicked off its 104th National Sports Festival on Friday in the city of Mokpo, Jeollanam-do Province, President Yoon Suk-yeol joined the opening ceremony himself. There, he pledged to make sure that everyone has fair access to sports. He added many athletes have nurtured their dreams and taken on challenges at this very festival and have become beloved sports stars, including the ones who recently shined at the Hangzhou Asian Games. In fact, medalists such as Woo Sang-hyuk and An San are set to compete in the tournament. A total of 30,000 people will participate in 46 official and 3 demonstration events until the 19th of this month. Passenger performance figures for Incheon International Airport in the third quarter exceeded 15 million for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the airport on Friday, the passenger numbers for the third quarter increased 180.8% on year, with a jump of over 5.4 million people. The cumulative passenger total up until the end of September came to just under 40 million, but that's still 74% of pre-COVID levels. But Incheon Airport expects demand to be in or around pre-pandemic levels by next year or 1 year earlier than its previous estimate. And moving on to climate change, there's a hole that's appeared in Arctic sea ice that's set to have a big impact on the winter season here in South Korea. It's known as Polar Polonia, and due to global warming, it's 10 times larger than normal. Jung Won-ju has the details.
This graphic shows the thickness of Arctic sea ice over 2 months from June. The closer the color is to blue, it means the ice is thinner. The graphic shows that the color is gradually darkening and spreading toward the center of the Arctic Ocean. This phenomenon of ice thinning to less than 1 meter thick and forming holes is called polar polynya. Polynyas, which occur in the Arctic during the summer, typically occur in coastal areas connected to land. It's unusual for an ice hole to be created in the middle of the sea like this, and its size is at least 10 times the size of existing polynyas.
It's believed that these polynya were formed by the inflow of relatively warm seawater, while sea ice was thinning due to global warming.
The concern is that once a polynya forms, it can lead to the emergence of even larger holes in the Arctic Ocean. Since polynyas supply a substantial amount of heat to the atmosphere, if they persist for an extended period, they can affect abnormal weather patterns.
As the Arctic temperature rises, the jet stream weakens, which can cause very cold Arctic air to flow into mid-latitude regions, including South Korea. This will expose those regions to frigid Arctic air, and they may experience temporary cold spells.
Furthermore, polynyas can impact the Arctic Ocean's ecosystem by exposing more of the sea surface. The research team emphasized the need for continuous monitoring and preparation for not only South Korean waters but also all oceans around the globe, as polynyas could lead to a reduction in Arctic sea ice if they persist. 정은주, Arirang News.
On the local front, this weekend is the last chance for people to attend the first ever Seoul Light 한강빛 Sun Festival. Hosted by the Seoul Metropolitan Government, it'll run until Sunday and is actually the largest light festival to be held by the Han River. The theme for its maiden year is Be the Light. On opening night last Friday, Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon promised that Seoul will be recognized as the City of Light by utilizing colorful lights and media art throughout the festival. While laser shows are the main event, the festival also has something called the Light Run, a charity run allowing participants to donate up to 35,000 Korean won when they finish running. The event is being held on Seorae Island and at Banpo Hangang Park and is free of charge to attend.
Most parts of South Korea will be drenched in autumn rain tomorrow. A group of rain clouds will start to move in from the north of the peninsula, causing nationwide rain. With the cold showers, temperatures will get a touch breezier in Seoul, with highs getting up to 19 degrees on Saturday. After the rain, colder mornings are expected with partly cloudy skies. As for the overall amount of rainfall, central regions, including the Samich-Pyeongtaek area, Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces will see 5 to 40. The surrounding regions, including Jeollabuk-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, will see 5 to 20. In between tomorrow's daytime and evening hours, locally heavy downpours of 20 millimeters per hour may batter some regions. Thunder and lightning may also follow at times. Tomorrow, Seoul will be starting off at 14 degrees Celsius. Highs in Seoul will get up to 19 degrees. Daejeon and Gwangju 21. Busan will be topping out at 24 degrees. Morning temperatures will keep plunging until early next week. Make sure to dress in layers. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings an end to this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.